now we're going to move into our next section. Let's discuss that.
All right, so Vulcan Robotics out of California have posted their robot in 3 days. While we don't have their thoughts and prototyping videos available to us, the robot seems like it would perform very well in the early season, featuring a claw to pick up the rings, a simple conveyor belt to feed their shooter, and a one-sided flywheel shooter. Something I didn't see in other Robot in 3 days was a linear slide wobble goal lift, easily picking up the wobble goal and placing it outside the field. The linear slide mechanism, which has been used in plenty of games before, is something that other teams could adopt in addition to their claw intake, which is a relatively simple mechanism but seemed effective in terms of picking up the rings. And then something minor to note is that Vulcan didn't actually have any official game elements, but I believe that the same ideas and concepts that they featured in this video would apply to most other teams. Is there anything else you guys noticed?
Yeah, I mean, personally speaking, I'm a big fan of the linear motion for the wobble goal, just because linear motion over rotational motion any day for me. But another thing is I actually really like how they created some of their game elements. Like the wobble goal was literally like a bike helmet with a stick coming out of it, which I thought was pretty neat. Another thing was their ring seemed like cardboard that was just taped together. I mean, again, very creative solutions for teams that are grinding out to get this done in 2 or 3 days. They also make these innovative game elements, which I think is pretty neat. So yeah.
So a couple things that I noticed from this one. This was probably one of the most competitive robots that we saw for Robot in 3 days, just because it was pretty much able to do everything on the field. I really it was pretty put together, and the only thing that I can see on this robot that would probably not be on a Worlds robot is the claw. The claw for lifting up the rings. But I could totally see other elements of this robot totally being used on a world class robot. One thing to note is they do use a one-wheel flywheel, and later on I'll talk a little bit more about why flywheels with a one wheel you're going to be significantly better off this year. So I really like that. I don't know how well their claw will work on an actual wobble goal. From watching a lot of live streams, especially the University Challenge, lining up to claw wobble goals seemed pretty difficult because it would just knock itself over. And so I'm reluctant to say that that's the best mechanism. I think there's going to be a better mechanism out there that we'll find out probably in the next month or two to do that.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have anything else about Vulcan? They've been doing this for, I don't know, this is their 4th year of doing Robot in 3 days. Always an awesome inspiration. Definitely you can learn from a lot of their prototypes. And that robot that they showed is probably better than, I don't know, 50% of robots at the first tournament. So if you can get something like that in 2 to 3 days, you should go for that. And so now we're going to move on to Team Reno. Team Reno was one of the teams that was part of the University Challenge. They built 2 robots. One of them was a simple claw robot using Tetrix. And the great thing about the robot was that they implemented vision in order to determine how many rings were in the starting stack for autonomous. The robot could score in the low goal, but was a little bit slow. If your team has a bunch of old Tetrix lying around, building a bot like this might not be a bad idea to use as a software prototyping bot. You could get your auto working on it, and you could learn how to drive around your robot just using a simple ARM bot like that. The other bot that they built was a shooter bot with a rotating arm. This had a 2-wheel flywheel design that could hold 1 disc. It was sometimes able to knock over the target shots, but it wasn't able to intake discs in the matches that I saw, so it only had 1 shot. Overall, Team Reno did a great job prototyping, and I think if you watch a lot of the videos on their process, you can learn a lot about how to go about making prototypes and what mistakes they made and learn from those. What did you guys think about this? Have you guys seen this one?
Yeah, I think Team Reno... I think rookie teams can learn a lot from the way they prototyped, and think about maybe learn some of their mistakes or failures that they ended up having in the final robots, and think about ways to improve on that. And this is they were operating on fairly little material, not like a vast expanse of parts. So what their end result was like pretty impressive, and just the fact like the shooter bot was able to hit that power shot occasionally, like yeah, props for them for that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely gonna add on that point about prototyping. I was gonna say, I mean, I think more important than just the final robot itself after the robot in 3 days is all the videos that you see about their prototyping process and how they went about, creating those different aspects of their robot. So again, I mean, there are tons of videos on our fun YouTube channel, so definitely check those out. But there are all the videos on their prototyping process and their different steps that they took, the different failures and successes. Those are by far the most important things from these robot in 3 days.
Right. So I mentioned they use a two-wheel flywheel, and while in a normal ball game that would work great, right? I know a lot of FRC teams use the two-wheel flywheel in Infinite Recharge. Some teams use it in FTC Velocity Vortex. The problem with the two-wheel flywheel in a ring game is, in order to make the rings more stable when flying, they need to be rotating. Since something rotating is going to be inherently more stable than something that's not. And so we'll see this especially in later ones. But the fact that a two-wheel flywheel is used can make the rings unstable and inaccurate. And this game is going to be all about accuracy. Can you hit all three shots every single time you go to shoot? And so I'm hoping that a lot of teams can learn from these different designs that people are using and find the one that works best for their team.
Just to chime in, so the Reno team used the Gecko wheels from Go Build Up, and actually at the end they actually came to the conclusion, kind of what you're saying, that it probably was not the best implementation of it, especially with how pliable the wheels were. That actually they probably would have went with either a single flywheel or something at least a little bit harder wheels with it as well too, because they definitely agreed with you on that.
Yeah, and I think they covered that in a lot of their videos. So if you go to our YouTube channel, our First Updates Now YouTube channel, you'll find a lot of their design process. And that's the same for all of the other 4 University Challenge teams that we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of which, let's move on to team UNLV. That's University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Yeah. So while they initially created several prototypes for shooters, they ended up going with a fast 4-bar linkage design to score in the locals. While the design was, while they didn't have any like complex shooter or any kind on their final robot, their robot had many aspects to it that was pretty simple and elegant, I think. Their 4-bar attachment was not only used for scoring rings in the low goal, but also was reused to lift and score the wobble goal outside of the perimeter wall. In the end, I think that their robot design shows a great and viable possibility for many less experienced teams. Rather than building a complex shooting mechanism with an intake and a transfer and all of that, the simple solution of just having a claw and a lift can easily help teams get started in scoring points and getting through that first competition. And at that scale, I think that teams could definitely make more cycles and more consistently score points in the low goal for their alliance. So what are your guys' thoughts on the UNLV design?
Yeah, I like the idea of using, your claw and arm for different, for 2 different things, right? For multi-purposing it, just because of the fact that it reduces the amount of mechanisms on your robot, right? If you're limited on time, right? Like they were in Robot in 30 hours, then it makes a lot more sense to focus on just one, decent to good mechanism than overworking yourself and having like 2 or 3 subpar mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the cool things about I was actually really surprised by the performance of this team. If you watch them in the match, they were consistently able to get 1 wobble goal into the drop zone, which was just worth a ton of points. And even though they didn't have the highest score, that all came down to autonomous. So like if you're a rookie team, this is definitely something to look out for. They use a 4-bar linkage and Tetrix, which I thought was kind of unique. It's a good way to use Tetrix. Tetrix is very good at building 4-bar linkages compared to building linear slides. So definitely they made the most of what they had. And being able to get that goal in the drop zone was worth just so many points that that it almost always carried them to have a reliable score. So if there are teams looking like a rookie team could move a goal into the drop zone, it shouldn't be that difficult. And here's a proof of concept to show that it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So moving on to Team Colorado Hyperloop. So Hyperloop started with a strategy breakdown, deciding to focus on the high goal and autonomous period. They used Go Builder for their robot, creating a combined motor and servo like crossbow kind of mechanism. I really don't know how to describe it other than that. They utilized springs to propel the rings forward. In addition, they had a very simple front-loading mechanism, which was passive, but they admitted that they didn't have much time to finish, ended up being a lot of gaffer tape used on it. But I could see it being adapted and used for other teams. It's a very relatively simple intake. And their method for their strategy breakdown was very informative. It's on the fun YouTube channel. Check it out. Plug. And overall, I think there's a lot that teams can learn just from their breakdown and the way that they approach their robot, including their final message, which was to do the math. So what do you guys think of all of that?
I mean, definitely do the math. I think it's really important to take into consideration how far you're shooting from and really get some good practice with how far you're going to shoot from, you know, like what power you want to set your motors at, and do that kind of like thinking and really think that part through, because again, accuracy is what it comes down to. Again, if you're shooting for like the middle goal, for example, and you shoot a little bit too high or a little bit too low, you know, you're scoring for the other alliance. So accuracy is just definitely one of the most important things in this game. Can
I just cut in? Actually, the team literally just sent me kind of a finalized video. I haven't actually looked at it yet, but I'll put it up in the background, and I'm going to put a little volume behind it so we can see it. So let's take a look.
And it's not a
I remember on the stream they had some software challenges, but overall they did a great job just making sure that the physics worked, and that's something that all teams should do. Whether you've taken physics or not, at least go on Chief Delphi, go on the FTC Reddit, go on FTC Discord. I'm sure there's somebody that can help you out with figuring out the physics for your shooter and to figure out what specs you need on it. How fast do you need your flywheel? How much power do you need if you're using a spring shooter? Stuff like that.
I'm hoping they're going to actually show us crossbow working, because I haven't seen it yet either. So
it looks like it's pulling back right now, and they're getting this disc in.
One thing to mention about the university teams is that, with the exception of Colorado and Reno, all the teams just borrowed kits from First Nevada, which kind of is why they went with either like the Rev or the Tetrix sort of thing as well.
Dance move.
Yeah. Looks like their catapult got
picked up while he was on a foreign exchange.
This is very janky, by the way.
Okay. Wait, I mean, I'm kind of, the anticipation's building at least.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
All right, let's fast forward. Let's see if they actually.
Okay, they got it.
Okay, they got it in.
How much range do I have?
They got it loaded.
Not enough. Oh, there we go.
I'm on the edge of my seat right now.
I think I am. We'll have to drop.
Yeah, I literally just got a message that I got this.
And we'll have to figure out, Dan, what the rules are on that, because
are they gonna shoot it?
Yeah. You can do it.
For the time being, I'm not gonna worry about it. And then on last, just shot.
Oh,
underpowered, but that would have been as simple as moving our.
They let go of it.
Thanks for University Challenge.
So, I mean, again, there you could see that the disc started like going all over the place as soon as they released it, and that's because it didn't have a spin on it. So that's why a one-wheel flywheel definitely has a big advantage in this sort of game. Yep. But overall, it was a really cool design, not something that I've ever seen in FTC. And
Same, yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So next up is Team Nottabot, and they use the Rev starter kit to build their robot. And this is exactly what I would do if I was at the beginning of the season in my rookie year. I would build a bot that looks almost identical to what they have. Because making a simple arm bot like what they have is a great way to just learn how the parts work. It's a great way to practice programming. And it's a great way to set up your autonomous. I mean, every team is going to have a drivetrain, so get all your drive motions working on this arm bot before you put them on your actual competition robot. So if your team can't afford it, try building one of these arm bots and then work on your actual competition bot after that. But get this arm bot working. That way you have something in case competitions come up quickly, and you can learn via it in order to make informed decisions for your competition bot. Anything else you guys notice about it? Yeah, it wasn't the highest scoring, but I thought it was still a great design.
Yeah, and I mean, the design was definitely great, and that's something that I can see a lot of rookie teams using throughout the year. But another thing is definitely to use other parts, like old parts and stuff, for prototyping. That's a lot of what my team did last year, where we used like old Tetrix parts just to put together some prototypes. And that is a huge part of the whole design process. And I really can't stress it enough. That's really, really important. So getting that done in the first 3 days is a huge head start over any other team.
Yeah, we keep a spare drivetrain around for that now, starting like last year, where we slap all our like basic prototype types on it and just sort of like, look, there's a robot, and then we can improve from there, right? Yeah.
And if you don't have parts, I'm sure that there's some veteran team in your area that used Tetrix at one point in time that wants to get rid of their Tetrix parts. And like, even though I wouldn't recommend using them for a competition robot, they're perfect for this. They're perfect just to prototype and get everything working. So definitely reach out. Everybody in the FTC community wants to help you be successful, especially if you're in your rookie year.
One thing I'll just comment, by the way, that Nanami, who is the person behind this was a person of one, or a team of one, who made this as well too. So hats off to somebody and by themselves doing this in a very short period of time.
Yeah, that I didn't know. That I did not know, but that's crazy. Wow. So I'm gonna move on to the next one, which is my personal favorite robot reveal so far, and that is the robot in 30 hours, created by 2 alumni from 7129 Robo Raiders. They had a very efficient design, and it really had an amazing suspended wheel-based intake, allowing the rings to come into the robot super smooth. And I mean, you can see it right in the video. It sucks that thing right in. It's really, really fast intake. I also think it has a lot of elements from the 2013 FRC game, which I thought was pretty nice to see. And another thing is that their shooter is pretty unique from some of the other ones that I've seen from these Robot in 3 days challenges. They actually have powered flywheels on both sides of the ring to shoot it, rather than just having one powered wheel on one side and then a rail or like a guide of some sort on the other side. So that's one thing that I saw as kind of a downside, which of course they would improve if they had more time. But and I think I was reading in the comment section of the YouTube video or something, but I feel like they put a second wheel on the other side just so it could improve the power of the shots. I think that's what I read, but yeah, so I mean, that's still an interesting concept, but I think that one wheel on one side and then a rail to provide some spin is definitely the better way to go. But I mean, all in all, I think that their entire design is just absolutely beautiful, and there will probably be a lot of robots very similar to this as we go throughout the competition season. I mean, even in February or March, as like regionals and states start coming up, I can still see a lot of robots looking like something like this. So I wouldn't be surprised.
And we've seen that before with the same group that does these Robot in 30 hours, or the Robo Raiders alumni group, like in Relic Recovery, right? They had that Clawbot, and then basically everyone built a Clawbot after that with their like linear slide and little flaps. And that was pretty influential. And then they had last year in Rover Ruckus, they had their dual the horizontal and vertical linear slides, which was imitated up until Worlds. So I think just like based off of their previous success, we will definitely end up seeing robots that look similar to this. But what they did with this one in particular, I was most impressed by that suspended intake. I thought that was really impressive to do on that scale, and I look forward to more Robot in 30 hours from them. Hopefully keep it going. Like another 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like they always put out like one of the best Robot in 30 hours, Robot in 3 days style of thing. One of the things, like, again, I do wish that they had done a single wheel flywheel, because like their shooter isn't the most accurate. If you saw Vulcan's was a lot more accurate than theirs. But that being said, like these aren't supposed to be perfect, and these are supposed to be to learn from. And I know they usually use like the same drive base, and they usually do They have the same drive base every year. They have a ton of Actibiotics parts. So even if you can't get a bot together that's like that, getting together something early can be helpful. So definitely recommend trying to just quickly prototype, especially this year when you're going to have a lot of time to iterate. Being able to get a prototype done quickly and then building up on it to refine it is going to be super critical.
Right, because regional competitions don't start till January. I don't know if that's
It depends
just
on
my
the region.
Right,
It depends
okay.
on the region.
Then it might just be first Chesapeake, but in the Virginia, Maryland area, competitions don't start till January for us.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, definitely more time to prototype and try things out.
I will say that in addition, Texas has made it so that it doesn't start until January as well.
Yeah.
So not the only region, at least.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to Kettering University. So I really liked Kettering's approach to their Robo in 30 hours. They spent quite a bit of time working on brainstorming game solutions and prototyping. I saw they had like a massive wall of whiteboard that was pretty much filled with just drawings. So they had several iterations of their shooter. They tested, different wheels and speeds before settling on an iteration that they liked the most. Again, something that I think a lot of teams can learn from. And their final robot ended up using the AndyMark Talrunner kit drivetrain with surgical tubing intake and a 180-degree indexer, which allowed the rings to go out the same side that they were intaken. And I would just definitely recommend taking a look at their prototyping clips, especially the shooter ones, because those were definitely very insightful. They used that one-sided horizontal flywheel with a rail. So is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
I mean, yeah, again, you can see a lot of components from this robot being reciprocated in other designs. I mean, it's most of these robot reveals are looking very, very similar to each other in terms of some of the concepts. Like, for example, the one-wheel flywheel, which I thought was pretty interesting. They also had one of the better intakes I've seen. I mean, to be honest, the only intakes that I've seen are this surgical tubing one, and then the Vulcan Robotics' claw intake, and then the robot in 30 hours wheel-based intake. But I think those are the three that I'm pretty confident we're going to be seeing a lot of. I really like the surgical tubing intake just because I feel like the pegs of the surgical tubes will be able to hit on the middle of like the hole in the rings, which I think might be an interesting dynamic. I'm not exactly sure because I haven't done too much prototyping myself, but it's definitely something great to see.
Yeah, I mean, I thought out of all the robots, this one was the most like what I would expect to see at Worlds. No, none of their prototypes were perfectly refined or anything, and they did get jammed, and they did have shooter issues, and they did have intake issues. But the architecture of intaking from one side, spinning around the entire ring, and then shooting out the same side is similar to what I would expect to see at Worlds. And I know this team has been doing RI3D for FRC in the past, and it was cool to see them do FTC. So yeah, they told me that they were shooting their reveal today, so hopefully we'll see a reveal for it later. That way we can see what it could actually do in the end. But I'm excited for it. I know they were having some issues at the end of their stream, so hoping that they got that solved out. That way we can see how that robot's actually supposed to work.
Yeah. I mean, one thing to add about that indexer is that I feel like a lot of top tier teams will be shooting from the same side that they're intaking from, just because that limits the amount of times that you have to like turn your robot or move your robot around. So I feel like if the rings are coming directly from in front of you, you just pick it up, you just move back and shoot. You don't have to turn your robot. No, you don't have to make too much maneuvering. And the less maneuvering, the more time you save, and the more time you get for more shots and more cycles. So the 180-degree rotation piece, I think, is a really, really critical piece that is really difficult to actually like integrate onto your robot. But if you can do it, it's something that's really worth looking at.
A general rule for brainstorming that my team has had before is definitely like think about the quickest way from where the game elements come from to where they go out, right? And it's something that's been repeated in a lot of other games with a lot of success. So as you know, if you think about it that way, that will lead, I think, in my opinion, to generally more successful and more like meta designs.
Yeah. I mean, I think a really good example of that actually that just came to my mind is in Skystone. If you had like a clawbot or something like that, and you were grabbing it from the front and you were letting go of the stone from the front of your robot, then you were picking it up. You'd have to turn a little bit more than the other teams every single time. And that would result in you wasting a tiny bit of time every single cycle and being a little bit behind the wheel-based robot intake teams. And, so something to look out for.
Yep. All right. Now we're going to go into the supplier builds, which are pretty much suppliers building robot in 3 days. In recent years, I think starting in Relic Recovery was the first year, it's become popular for suppliers to participate in robot in 3 days or robot in 1 weekend, especially in FTC. I don't think it's that common in FRC yet, but who knows what will happen there. This year, the suppliers Robotics and GoBuilda both did it. And the GoBuilda robot is probably one of the most clean and put together robot in 3 days robots I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
I could see that at Worlds, like no changes. That bot could go to Worlds. That being said, when working on robot in 3 days, a lot of these suppliers have pretty much unlimited resources compared to these university teams, which are usually only given a kit and they have to work with the starter kit. And their goal is to show off their parts rather than to make mistakes and teach teams. So a lot of them are going to make a perfect robot that rather than try prototyping with stuff that teams could actually afford to do. And our producer Tyler had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, this is something just to jump in, and I think there's a bit of a distinction here between Revs and GoBuildas as well too with this. And the preface is, GoBuilda and Rev obviously provide giveaways and kits and things for fun, and we definitely appreciate that. But that doesn't make immune to criticism at the same time. So, the one thing I'll say, in particular about GoBuilda is, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, is that is this a robot in 3 days, or is this a supplier product showcased by my crap stuff, or by my stuff, right? And that's what frustrates me a little bit with this is that, yeah, they made an awesome robot, but on the other hand, it's just a showcase for GoBuilda. And that's what kind of flusters me a bit is that Fun's been doing robot in 3 days for a long time now, for quite a few years. And going back to the original people who did a robot in 3 days, the intent was to show off things for teams so they could learn what works, what doesn't work, and explore a bit more from that. And that's, I think Rev in particular, I think did a pretty good job showing off certain types of prototypes. Yeah, it was with their parts, but at least it was more detailed on prototypes and that sort of thing. GoBuilda made a great robot. It looks awesome. But on the other hand, from a learning experience, I don't think there's as much there. And that's, to me, doesn't really have as much as a spirit for that. And I know some people are going to disagree or agree with me on that, but to me, robot in 3 days, and we used to do one with AndyMark for FRC a couple of years ago, and I'll still stand my ground on that I think the point of it should be to show off for teams, things that work, things that don't work, so you can learn from the experiences and go out and do it yourself, and not just be a supplier showcase for things.
Yeah.
No one escapes the wrath of Fun.
Or me in particular.
Yeah, or Tyler, yeah.
And I know that Ethan was answering questions, explaining his design process throughout the stream, but a lot of people are just going to forward to the last reveal of the robot and not actually understand what went behind that. So that's definitely something to go out and look into. If you are going to use the GoBuilda robot, go figure out how he did that, why he did that, what was his design decisions. That way you can learn from it instead of just saying, oh, if I buy GoBuilda, I can build that. That's not how it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think I got a very similar point. I think it's from the FTC Discord or something, but regardless of which design system you use, you can build an equally competitive robot. So it's not about the parts you use, it's about how you use them. And
Right.
that in itself is like a really big lesson for any newbies or any inexperienced people out there. Like, just remember that it doesn't matter which build system you use. Just
I mean, when I went to Worlds, last year, I think I saw on the finals field, so any of the 16 or 32 teams in both Detroit and Houston, out of all of those, there was a Rev drivetrain, there was an Actobotics drivetrain, there was a GoBuilda drivetrain, I think there was even a Tetrix drivetrain, and there was a Vex drivetrain, right?
yeah.
Teams in all 5 suppliers, but they're still the top 32 teams in the world. And that's not because they use a certain supplier or another, it's because they went through the design process and they designed the best robot they could.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I mean, honestly, that's a huge reason why I love all the videos that we've been posting recently on Fun, because now they're not just a showcase of here's the best robot design, use this. It's more, here's what works, here's what doesn't, and here's what universities and other people have been going through that your team will be going through over the course of the next few months. So here's a preview to what your season will look like, right? So you'll probably end up trying the 2-wheel shooter, you'll end up trying the 1-wheel shooter, you'll end up trying the surgical tubing intake, you'll try the wheel intake, the claw. So, all these universities and these Robot in 3 days teams have already shown us what we'll be seeing throughout the year, which I think is the most important part of this.
And I think Tyler kind of touched on it, but I think the original intent of like Robot in 3 days for FRC, right, was to sort of make something that realistically most teams could do better than them, right? Was sort of the like intent in a way, right?
So, yeah, I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So when you have something that is like the end product is like very good, it's sort of, I don't know, it in a certain way it does the opposite of like improving teams, or like not improving teams, but making teams enthused rather, right? It's like, oh well, there's gonna be a lot of robots like that. Oh well, I don't think we can do that.
I just want to jump in. So my general point is that I think the issue with the Supplier thing is that, in Robot in 3 days or the University Channel, I'm not trying to say go watch Fun's University Channel stuff. That's not my point. My point is that there's going to be less bias in something, right? So, like, we got parts from GoBuilda, we got parts from Rev, and we appreciate that. But at the ethos of it, I told those teams, I said, if something doesn't work, say so, and say why it doesn't work, and go through that. And my only qualm with that is that from a supplier's perspective, are they going to provide that same brutal, candid honesty to, if this doesn't work, don't use this on a robot sort of thing, or find a different method of doing something as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thanks for watching. If you want more fun content, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Thanks to all of our co-executive producers on Patreon and Tier 2 Plus subscribers on Twitch, keeping fun loud, live, and independent.